good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's HNIP webinar. So this is the second of two HNIP webinars that we have done over the past month, looking back at the projects that have been funded under the Heat Networks investment project, focusing on the progress that they have made since they've been awarded funding, sort of the progress so far, and looking forward to how they can progress, the wider benefits that they have produced, and any obstacles that they've overcome. So today's so the last webinar that we did on this topic was focused on the north of England. This one's primarily focused on London and the south of England. More specifically, we will be joined by the Nottingdale Heat Network in London with Shaun Haden, the Enfield Heat Network with Stephen Diver, and the Swaffham Prior Heat Network in Cambridge with Sheryl French. So before we get going, I'm just going to go through some general housekeeping. Firstly, as we've already mentioned, that the session is being recorded, so the video and the slides will be made available after the event if you'd like to rewatch that, and for any attendees that couldn't make the live recording. So you could probably tell this is a normal Teams call as opposed to a Teams live, so please try to keep your cameras and microphones off unless you're speaking. If you do have a question or wish to contribute to an ongoing discussion, you can just use the raise your hand feature, and then we'll get to you. So in terms of questions and Q&A, there will be a live Q&A at the end once everyone's spoken. However, feel free to place your question or comment in the chat, or type of question in the Q&A, which we'll answer at the end, or if it's relevant to the discussion that's ongoing, we will endeavour to get to that more closer to when you've put it in the chat. We might not get around to answering everyone's questions for whatever reason, mostly time. However, we will endeavour to respond to everyone in an email after the webinar is complete. So without further ado, we've got an exciting agenda planned for today, including an initial look back at the Heat Networks investment project from Andrew Cripps, the technical director at Triple Point, who I will hand over to now. So thank you, Andrew. Take the floor.
Thank you, Michael, and to everybody for joining, and good afternoon. So I expect quite a lot of you know a bit about HNIP. You probably know about this event because you're on our mailing list. So I'm assuming you know a little bit, and you know a certain amount about Heat Networks as well. So we're not going back to that level, but it's really important, we think, to remember what HNIP was for and to consider how much things have moved on in the time since we started. So we began work on HNIP back in 2018, following on from an initial pilot phase that the department ran by themselves. And the aim of HNIP, as the slide shows, was to invest money in heat networks with a view to developing the sector, creating as far as possible a self-sustaining market for heat networks, to enable the growth of heat networks to support decarbonisation of the UK energy system. Now, we think we've made quite good progress. Clearly, that's a very ambitious target that was set, but we think we have made good progress towards that. It's been continued in the scheme that succeeded it, the Green Heat Network Fund, for which there have been other events, and I'm sure most of you will know about what's going on there. What we feel HNIP has really done, as was intended, is to bring projects forward, and the point of today's event is to tell you more detail about some of them. But basically, by bringing forward more networks, low carbon heat networks that, with plans in place, will grow to become progressively larger and meet the aims of supplying a much higher percentage of heat through heat networks. But there's broader aims than that. Obviously, we want those networks to be really good quality, and to meet the local needs and the customer needs, and we can hear about that as well in today's sessions. And perhaps almost more important than anything else is to build the capacity and the capability of the potential customers or project sponsors for heat networks, and the delivery teams for heat networks, and the support consultants and others that enable heat networks to grow. And this is a particularly important piece, because if the rate at which we need the heat network sector to grow is significant, if it's going to meet the aims that we have in overall policy terms. And so getting this growth in the quantity and quality of the people in the supply chain is really important. And I think we've done quite a lot in that respect, as well, as we're going to hear today. Moving on, you again probably know there's been quite a good range of projects. The markers on the map show more or less where they are. Sometimes quite difficult to put them on where they're very close to each other. The scheme HNIP is mainly England. We have a couple of projects in Wales, but other Scotland has been doing a different approach to these things, so that's why the map shows the distribution that it does. It's quite an interesting thing that the pace, there's been significant rate of change in the policy sector for the sector, and in fact the early aspirations were as much about growing heat networks of any type, but as the scheme has developed, it's been clear that we needed to decarbonize more quickly, and we've seen a move away from some of the early schemes that had greater use of gas CHP towards a lot more use of heat pumps and energy from waste. Notwithstanding that, we've invested something around 270 million in the set of heat networks, and those are contributing to a total investment in these of around 700 million, exceeding 700 million into those heat networks. So really quite a significant collection of projects which are coming forward of good scale. And amongst other connections, that means that when this is built out, we could see as many as 75,000 residential customers being served by these heat networks. So that's the scale of what's been done already, or is being done already. Another really important dimension of the work of HNIP was in trying to improve the processes by which things happen, and to reduce the cost of some aspects of what happens. And we've got three elements which are shown on the slide here. The first is Beehive. The purpose of Beehive is to be a place at which potential customers for heat networks can put forward their request for support, particularly local public sector customers can put forward their request, what it is that they want for support, and then potential funders or suppliers of a whole range of services can get together with them there. So if you haven't come across that before, it's the acronym there was the BEIS, because that was the department at the time, Business and Energy and Industrial Strategy, Heat Investment Vehicle. So the idea was to bring together, and still is, to bring together projects with investors to bring them forward most effectively. So if that's of interest, please investigate that. Easy to find on the internet. And the second and third ones here are both areas in which what was felt coming into the programme was that there's so much similarity between projects that it makes sense, as far as possible, if the documentation that is used in them can be made more common. We can save costs developing bespoke documentation for particular situations where other people will already have something similar. So these two sets of documentation, standardized due diligence set, it's quite difficult to say, which deals with how a heat network is presented if it's looking to refinance or be sold on, and the template, heat contract templates, enabling people to have a good starting point for how they want to set out their contracting relationships, while still having scope to adjust the details that are appropriate to the project to meet the needs of and risks and balance of risks for that project. So again, if you don't know about these, you can find them again through our website and through the internet. And moving on, another important thing we've done, and bringing us to the theme of today, is case studies. There's nothing quite like seeing what other people have done and understanding how they've gone about it in order to help bring confidence to others that it's possible. They can point to something that's like them. And so there's a number of case studies, and I'm sure the link will be posted in the chat if it isn't already there, to show where these can be found. And these show the range of types of projects that we've been supporting. And in fact, the two on the left-hand side are being presented to us today. And in our last session, we heard from the schemes in Leeds and Gateshead and Liverpool, which are shown on the slide as well. And I'm very hopeful. Projects are at different stages of development. I'm very hopeful that the two to the left, South Seaham and Solihull, will be breaking ground quite soon, and will be an opportunity to hear from them in due course. And so the point of the case, so that's where we are. So I've come to the end of my part. It's great to have you all here. I hope you'll find the session useful. Please feel free to ask questions. It's the point of the day to come up with to answer your concerns that you might have if you're launching into one of these types of projects and are looking for support. So without any further ado, I'll pass over to Shaun to tell us about the project in Nottingdale.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi all. So my name's Shaun Haden. I'm Head of Strategic Programmes and Innovation at Lancaster West, which is part of RBKC. Here today to talk to you about the Nottingdale Heat Network, which is a heat network on the Lancaster West estate, which is the estate which surrounds Grenfell Tower. Next slide, please. As you're probably aware, big focus on the Lancaster West estate and Grenfell Tower following the tragedy that happened a few years back. Big government commitment to turn the estate into a model for the 21st century. And our vision sort of for the estate is fourfold. We want to be that model for the 21st century housing estate. We want the estate to be carbon neutral by 2030. There's a big co-design and co-delivery aspect to everything that we do on the estate, and Lancaster West sits in the broader Nottingdale ward, which has achieved eco-neighbourhood status from the GLA. So we want to turn Nottingdale into the UK's largest eco-neighbourhood and put that green recovery at the heart of Grenfell recovery. So that's our vision. If you move on to the next slide. Little bit about Lancaster West. It's a really small estate, 826 homes, hyper diverse, good range of tenures, well, a range of tenures on the estate, leasehold and tenants. There's some commercial assets on the estate as well. There's a range of stock on the estate as well, ranging from kind of 1930s Victorian homes to all the way up to kind of modern sort of 2018 new blocks. Next slide, please. As I said, there's a big government commitment to turn the estate into a model for 21st century estates, big programme of works that are taking place on the estate. The aim is to kind of turn the estate into zero carbon, as I said. There's four aspects to our programme. One is this concept of a deep retrofit, refurbishing all of the homes on the estate, internally refurbishing those homes as well to a really modern standard. Landscaping and public realm is a big thing which has emerged, so turning the landscape and the estate itself into somewhere which is pleasant to be around, turn it into a garden estate. And the other key aspect which we're sort of talking about today is the Nottingdale Heat Network, which is a major plank of the programme. So Nottingdale Heat Network is basically trying to turn two end-of-life gas communal heating systems into one single renewable heat network. We've got four kind of key aims. One is to turn it into a reliable heat network. One is to deliver really excellent customer experience. One is to kind of protect customers from rising energy prices and embed fuel poverty within the work. And the other one is, as I mentioned, to support the council's ambition to be carbon neutral by 2030. So those are the kind of four things we're trying to achieve via the Nottingdale Heat Network. When we started, we've been recently noted as a kind of a case study for how to deliver green heat network fund applications as well. So, as I mentioned, phase one of the heat network is on the Lancaster West estate, 826 homes. 75% of those are leaseholders, tenants, 25% are leaseholders. RBKC is the main freeholder, which makes this project really like easier to do, I would say. 80% of the estate are on communal heating, those two gas-fired communal heating systems. One communal heating system is literally on the roadside. It was underneath the tower when the tragedy happened. That's been moved to next to the roadside. So we've got a temporary kit which we are going to roll up into one heat network, and another end-of-life system as well. 20% of the estate are on individual gas combi boilers. So one of the challenges that we're going to face is to bring those 20% into one communal heating system and try and sell that to customers. The scheme also includes a leisure centre, which is owned by RBKC, and a local independent academy. There's also 41 business units as well, which are part of the scheme, which sit underneath one of the blocks. I've included this slide. I think it might be an old diagram, but I think it's useful for me to kind of reflect on the journey that we've been on for the last 4 years. So when we started this project, I knew nothing about heat networks, but now I know quite a lot about heat networks. And actually, one of the main reflections I'd say or make is that we've been really well helped and supported by both HNDU and HNIP along this journey. One of the things that this sort of diagram shows is, or suggests, is that this process is quite linear, and it starts one end and ends at the other. My experience, and my experience might be completely different to everyone else's, I accept, but it doesn't always work like that. So, for example, we started really at the techno-economic feasibility stage on the estate and went back to the master planning stage. Not least because the council itself didn't have that piece of work done, didn't have a real understanding of its energy needs across the borough. And we had a particular need on the estate of a particular project that was kicking off. HND, as I said, have been really supportive. The grant that we've received from them unlocked the support that we needed to get the right kind of people involved in the project. So really experienced project team, and project management function, and experienced stakeholder engagement people that have done this kind of thing before, which is really key for us. So we were at a local housing team or sort of housing professionals. So heat networks were really not our thing. So bringing on board a team of people and consultants that could help us move the project forward at pace and with the right knowledge, it's been really helpful for us. And HNDU and HNIP have enabled us to do that. What I would say is HNIP has enabled this scheme to happen. So without that grant funding, that seed grant funding that we received, the project wouldn't have been able to progress to where it is today. Just going back to my original point, so we're now moving into construction. We've got contractors coming on site, but we're still dealing with commercialization aspects. So I think what I'm saying is basically the process itself is quite muddly, and it sort of merges and things roll into each other as the program moves on. Next slide, please. Alongside that diagram you've just seen around the programmatic aspect of the program of moving the project from a sort of master planning to operation phase at the end, we've sort of run this kind of co-design aspect throughout that process as well. And as I mentioned in my first couple of slides, co-design and co-delivery is really crucial and key to what we're doing on the estate here. As you can imagine, there's a deficit of trust, there's a deficit of kind of engagement with the council from the local residents. So one of the key things that we've been doing is working, door to door with residents on a regular basis, talking to them about what it is that they want this network to look like, and what it is that they want from the wider refurbishment of the estate. And what you can see there is a kind of timeline of that activity and some of the kind of measurables that we've got from the work that we've done, basically. But this is really crucial for us, because for us where we are, consent is everything. So if we don't get consent to act and to deliver on the heat network, then it's impossible for us to do anything on this estate. So that's just something that's really, really central to what we've done here at Lancaster West. Next slide, please. A little bit about the tech. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not a technical person, but I've become more and more understanding of the technical aspects to this project as time has gone on. So it's effectively run by air source heat pumps and a water source heat pump, which are situated on the roof of the leisure centre. As I mentioned, the leisure centre is going to be part of the scheme. We're looking at developing a thermal store, which is going to be positioned, hopefully, subject to planning, outside of the leisure centre. And there's going to be a renewable boiler room, which is repurposing an existing boiler room, which is supporting half of the estate at the moment. The aim is for it to be completely renewable technology and use green electric to power the kit. Here's just some images of the energy tree, as we're calling it. As I said, subject to planning permission. This is the kind of water store which is positioned at the moment outside the leisure centre. As I said, subject to planning permission, which is going through at the moment. So some more images of potentially what the boiler room may look like. What you see there is a Moroccan garden in the bottom two images, and the removal of the stack which is currently there, which is supporting a kind of gas-fired communal heating system. Next slide, please. We've recently signed contracts with 2 contractors, Vital Energy and Synergist. The scheme is divided into 2 really. So we've got a DBOM contract, which is design, build, operate, and maintain the primary network, which runs around the estate. And then the second contract is the design and build of the secondary and tertiary networks inside the residential homes. We're just about to go on site. We've had contractors with us now for a couple of months, and we've signed those agreements, and we are literally breaking ground in the next couple of months. As one of the key features of the conditions of the HNIP grant that we received was that we should set up a local energy company to run the network. We've done that. That's been a really interesting process to go through. Not least in our own context. The entity is called Nottingdale Heat. It's 100% council owned. It's overseen by a shareholder committee. There's a board of 6, 2 residents, 2 independents, and 2 council officers. Will have its own independent professional management, and it's got its own business plan. So at the moment, that entity is sort of in its early days, is in its beginnings, but the aim is for that entity to operate and maintain the network. One thing I would reflect on here is the process we've gone through to set that up has not been without problems. It's not been without political interest. And the other learning, I'd say, which is probably sort of the same for most local authority run projects, as you'd expect, is the level of political interest from our members is really key and really high, I'd say. A little bit about an emerging price promise. This is basically us working with residents to understand how we can kind of develop something which will enable them to sell heat to them at a reasonable cost, an affordable price. Basically, it's an emerging piece of work, not fully completely finished yet or signed off. So just put this slide in as a bit of a placeholder, just to kind of go through roughly. There's 3 aspects to it. One is the refurbishment program, which I talked about earlier. So a lot of the heat network is absolutely dependent on the wider refurbishment of the estate, so reducing the energy demand of the building fabric, and that's part of it. So we're looking to reduce heat usage by around 25%. The other one is an emerging promise around how much people will pay, that they will pay the cheaper of energy cost, either the cost of providing renewable heat or using gas. And then a fair standing charge is based on the property size. As I said, emerging piece of work, but something that we are sort of really keen to kind of work through with council colleagues and residents, that we make sure that we can we don't punish residents for going first, and provide a just transition. this is an extract from the key decision report, which went through council in July. So this is an overview of the cost of the programme. About 26 and a bit million pound, 1.1 million HNIP grant, which was really key to get this project off the ground. Can't stress that enough. And the ongoing support we've had from HNIP and HNDU has been invaluable in supporting us as a project team. A little bit more about the funding itself. Largely come from the HRA, as you'd imagine, because we're replacing tertiary and secondary kit in residential homes, but the general fund will make up a significant proportion of the money that's going to be passed through to the Nottingdale Heat. So one of the key things that we've wanted to do since we started this project is to look to expand the network. We've recognised that it's a really small scheme based on small kind of energy outputs. So we've always had the idea of looking to expand the network beyond Lancaster West once we get phase 1 up and running and we've established that trust with residents on the estate. Phase 2 is kind of an emerging piece of work. It's looking at the wider Nottingdale ward, as I mentioned earlier. As I said, we've got eco neighbourhood status from the GLA, and there's a whole range of projects that are ongoing in and around Lancaster West, which is an estate within Nottingdale. So the aim would be to, with political support, to move beyond Lancaster West into the wider borough, the wider ward. I mentioned earlier that we started from a position of feasibility rather than master planning. We actually went back and done a master plan for the wider borough, and that piece of work is concluded recently as well, and has looked at kind of other heat network opportunities in the wider borough. As someone who's not a techie, you probably expect me not to talk about the technical success or challenges. So some of the things I thought which we've been really successful at, is building a winning team. I think there's a couple of our team members perhaps in the crowd today, but genuinely speaking, I felt like we've been in really good hands with the consultants that we've employed, with HND support we've had, and with HNIP as well. And that's been really useful for us in terms of harnessing government grant, building momentum, triangulating lessons learned, so learning from others what's worked well in the wider sector, what hasn't worked well, where others have failed, where others have succeeded. We've tried to learn what from those examples. The resident co-design, as I mentioned, really key throughout this project. Navigation of the politics, it's been a success from my perspective, but it's also a very big challenge. And one thing that a couple of things we've also done is to see these projects as more than just an infrastructure project. So rather than just pipe work, it's actually, who are the customers at the end, who are the residents, who are the people that are going to actually use the system, are going to actually pay the bills. And one other thing is just questioning everything, basically. And I think we've got a team which has got a good balance of heat network experience, but also people like myself who don't come from that background. So challenging what we're being told and challenging kind of what's been accepted is kind of what we've tried to do, I think, which is something which is something which is really helped us. Some of the challenges, politics I've mentioned, interdependencies of a complicated programme. So as I mentioned, this wider refurbishment programme, it's probably about £150 million refurbishment programme that sits on top of this heat network. So you've got 12 of 13 blocks that are all being deep retrofitted at the same time, or planning to be anyway. And there's the integration with that wider refurbishment work. Small scheme, as I mentioned, finances are finely balanced. Contract arrangements with residents. So what contracts can we rely on in order to sell the heat to customers? And then uncovering the unexpected. So there's lots of skeletons, I might say, within the things we've gone through. So finding leases that have not been signed by council teams, finding roofs which are which need significant work on them, and so on and so forth. So just some reflections on successes and challenges. And I think that is the last of my slides.
Thanks, Shaun. Handing over to Stephen now.
Hiya. Thanks for that, Shaun. That's really interesting and very useful to hear. And I think some of the heat network professionals that you mentioned in your team used to be on my team and still are on my team in some cases. So yeah, hi to everybody that's listening. I'm Steve Diver. I am Energetik's operations manager. I've been with the company since 2015. Seems like a lifetime ago now, but yeah, could I have the first slide, please? I cover everything kind of from business development to our customer services function to managing half our team. I'm your classic jack of all trades within the business. But similar to the previous presentation, we are fully owned by Enfield Council, so Energetik. It's quite an aspirational company. We were formed, as I say, in 2015 to create a series of low carbon heat networks. And we basically started with a blank sheet of paper and put the customer in the middle of it and designed a business all the way around them, whether that was around cost, carbon savings, high spec, efficiency of the network, etc., etc. And obviously, being council owned, any profits that are generated in the future managed to stay in the borough. So that was kind of quite an important factor in designing the business. Slightly different to what Shaun just mentioned, we kind of were cherry picked from industry, working in at the time when we started, a much smaller pool. But as I've just mentioned, a couple of people are on this call were part of our team. Historically, it is quite a small pool, but we brought a series of people together from different areas, so technical and stakeholder engagement, general customer service, metering, billing, etc. But all kind of with a heat network focus. So yeah, our goal was to kind of help decarbonise Enfield, which is something that's morphed over time as climate emergencies have come forward. But that was very much the target. So yeah, as I mentioned, we're fully owned by Enfield Council, but we are operated in a private limited company capacity with a series of executive and non-executive directors on our board from industry. As I mentioned, we put our customer in the middle, and Energetik is in the middle of the delivery of that service. So, we're owned by Enfield Council, but all the major contracts come into us. So our design and build contract, our heat offtake agreement with the Waste Authority, customer services, etc. We make direct agreements with developers for connection and supply. But Enfield is our main funder. So they are the borrower for HNIP in this case, and they from HNIP, sorry, and they on lend to us. Subsidy control stated, compliance considered, of course. And yeah, we when we started this business, it was a very different market 10 years ago. But we very much thought, you've got one bite of the cherry. So everything was designed with expansion and big carbon savings in mind, with a view that heat networks were going to grow into something quite significant in the future. As a way of decarbonising. So we made sure that all our energy centres have got plenty of extra capacity. We made sure that our pipe work was oversized to make sure that we could supply and connect to buildings in the future. Obviously, with zoning coming down the line, that's quite pertinent. And we have a very strong focus on quality. So if you could just flip to the next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit more about that on that one. So the quality has to be there, and that was kind of one of the precursors to our business plan. So we've got a very long-term model, which is sustainable in the long term. 40 years is probably double what the original feasibility studies put out, and we kind of halved the rates of return. Again, one of the benefits of being owned by a local authority is that they can take that long-term view. But we have a single customer tariff, and that tariff is built on on an avoided cost of gas. So we're charging relatively low rates for heat compared to probably some in the network, and we're about on par with gas at the moment. And we've spent a long time, I think Shaun alluded to it as well, engaging with stakeholders at every level. So that's politicians and officers within the council, but customers and people that are going to be connected, and sales teams and people that are going to have to sell on our behalf. So, and that's crucial. Like it's just impossible to deliver a project, as all the regulation that's coming down the line alludes to. Customers don't get a choice, and so you need to bring them along with the journey. But we very much wanted to control quality, because we don't charge our customers based on what networks cost to run, and we charge them on what we thought, well, not the actual costs, we charge them on what we expect the networks to run based on design efficiencies, etc. So we have to make sure that our networks operate as they do, and that means that we check every weld, every piece of insulation. They are delivered for us by our contractors, but we are the policeman of what we're buying, and we make sure, whether that means cutting ceilings down to check insulation levels, which all contributes to making sure that our network is as efficient as it can possibly be, which keeps us running over the long term. Customer service, I'm probably going to jump over actually, I think, but just to say, we designed our customer service on a very stringent standards as a kind of stretch goal for our contractor, who they switched to provide our customer services and in-home maintenance. And we designed a spec that was based on what we expected. So, for example, we have a 20-second phone call answering service with no options. Within 4 hours, we do everything we can to make sure that our customers get as good, if not a better service than through the gas and electricity markets. So here's a brief timeline. I'm not going to touch on this because I'm conscious of time, but just to kind of say, things take a long time. We were incorporated in 2015. Took 2 years of going back and forth, due diligence, green book, various, but we got initial investment in 2017 to unlock the first part of the business plan, with HNIP funding coming in 2019 to unlock the rest. So we got started in 2017. The rest was to build out our strategic scale network. And then in 2021, we got further funding for another 49 million to embark upon a fairly ambitious expansion project to connect a series of other development opportunities. If you could just jump over the next, well, actually, just show me the next slide, please, just momentarily. So this is a bit of a brief map of Enfield. We've got 4 networks, although I know there's 5 pins on this map, but we've got 4 networks serving 5 developments. All are operational. Meridian Water in the southeastern corner is the strategic scale network, and we've got, say, varying from a couple of hundred to I think we've got about 1,000 customers in total. But these networks are designed to build and expand as developments are built out. So we can supply potentially 60 to 100,000 customers eventually with what we're putting in at the moment. Just next slide, please. So HNIP funding, as I mentioned, HNIP was one of the keys to unlocking our business plan. We've received, I think I did some calculations whilst Shaun was talking, and we've received probably about 15% of the HNIP pot that was distributed. But it's a massive network. So we had a massive amount of funding from HNIP, which, in terms of key wins, this project wouldn't have been as big and as aspirational if it wasn't for HNIP. But that unlocked us to build our energy centre and install the first kind of 6 kilometres of pipework for phase 1, as well as doing some small scale extensions during our to our satellite networks. Just on to the next slide, please, and I'll show you what we've built. So this is the Meridian Water Energy Centre. This is the strategic scale network that Andrew was talking about at the beginning, with massive capacity of thermal storage. For those techies out there, there's about 1,400 cubic meters in there, enough to take a massive amount of waste heat from the North London Waste Authority and use it as our batteries to then pipe out to networks. Now, I say up to 100,000 homes in terms of who can be connected. My technical director comes up with a different number each time, but the number is essentially limitless. Obviously, you can provide base load or peak load, or so we're putting in pipes that can carry kind of 30,000 customers worth of heat per leg at peak demand. So pretty high capacity network. The first homes at Meridian Water, all 20 of them, came online in September 23, but that will be built out to kind of build up to about 10,000 homes over time. But as I say, we've got massive capacity in the network. So next slide, please. We then applied again in kind of 2020, 2021, where a series of large-scale developments came forward through planning, and it essentially provided the catalyst for us to apply to Enfield for more funding, which in turn we went to HNIP with the council and supported them to secure further funding to do this work. And that was essentially extension pipe work. So extending across the borough basically to interconnect networks / lay the foundations for future decarbonisation of Enfield. So that looks like the map on the next slide. I forgot that I'm not in control, which is here's a slightly ugly map of Enfield, but you've got the Meridian Water Energy Centre and the kind of Meridian Water development in the southeast corner. We're currently building all that blue pipe work at Meridian Water is in, as is the network at the Energy Centre, as I just mentioned. We're extending up towards Edmonton Green, that Scion line, and separately at the same time up towards Ponders End Heat Network, which should be completed at some point this year. It's not easy to dig through very busy North London roads, so one of the lessons learned is lots and lots of stakeholder engagement along the routes. Things go wrong, pipes burst, electrics get shot, not by us always, but yeah, being very engaged with transport and highways and making sure that everyone's fully briefed on what's going on is really important. And then the western extension was to connect to our other heat network satellite schemes and pick up a number of different opportunities along the way. Now, getting to the kind of the important part of the presentation, we've had unprecedented issues over the last number of years, which everybody's been exposed to, inflation being one of them. And you know, our project was originally going to be 49 million, as I mentioned, and we were kind of pre-purchasing a lot of stuff. So a key win there was we bought, I think, 90% of the pipe for this extension project. There was a 30% cost increase the day after, so there was a massive win there. But a 49 million pound project with 2 years of gross inflation and massive labour increases and materials increases has made that project, as was previously shown, a 76 million pound project, which is untenable, really. So, you know, just to give you an example, £3,500–4,000 pounds per metre of trench dug to deliver these pipes, and we're talking like, you know, metre and a half trenches, has gone from £3,500–4,000 pounds to £6,500–7,000 pounds. So we're truncating the network somewhat at this present moment in time, kind of reprofiling some of the spend to bring it back within budget so we can still deliver, and to potentially reprofile and use the funding to go in a different direction, potentially south down into Haringey. There is another HNIP fund approval that Haringey received to connect to Energetik, so you know, aspirational to get beyond Enfield, and we've got massive amounts of heat in Enfield. So it's fair to say we are working through that with HNIP at the moment. I'm sure we're not the only company and project that are experiencing this type of issues. Next slide, please. But again, key wins and key successes is that HNIP have been great and have supported us through it, and you know, realise and recognise that these issues happen in the market, and are helping us to cut our cloth accordingly. So yeah, you know, key success, HNIP, we probably wouldn't be certainly to the same scope and extent of a network as we were in because of HNIP. We did, you know, the lines on the page that I previously showed probably wouldn't have happened without HNIP funding and the grants that we received, meaning that we could deliver a much bigger project to decarbonise Enfield. One of the big successes that we had was that we actually carved up the kind of extension into different project lots to kind of try and develop some competition in the market. There's not that many people businesses with a balance sheet that can take £50 million worth of project. So we carved it into smaller chunks, which brought new tenderers to market, and some have been better than others, but some are really, really good. And as I mentioned previously, like procurement of all the materials has been was a bit of a boon. I'm sure I don't know what that price would have been if we'd have been buying pipes as we went. Just some of the lessons. I mean, working with sorry, next slide, please. Sorry. Working with a HNIP has been great. Those guys are really supportive and have been there every step of the way for us, working with us. You know, it's very difficult to kind of try and, we couldn't have forecast any, you know, a global pandemic, wars in the east of Europe, etc. But I think one of the key things is to make sure that you've got enough flexibility for program flow. I mean, we built in, we kind of got rid of optimism bias in our early due diligence exercises and tried to build in flow, but obviously things have changed significantly since then. So I think the important thing is to just, you know, make sure that we keep on working with HNIP and we kind of develop and change the project to suit the environment that we're working in at the moment. I'm going to be quiet because I'm conscious that there's another, but that's me done. I'm conscious that we still have another speaker and not that long left, but I'm happy to take questions afterwards, I would guess, given the time now. So thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Cheers.
Sheryl, over to you.
If you could take me on to the third slide. So I'm Sheryl French and I'm from Cambridgeshire County Council, and I'm going to talk to you about Swaffham Prior Heat Network, which was a community-led project, and it was led by the community who approached us to say, we're a village of 300 homes on oil. We've talked to the village and on balance, most people would like to get off oil, and can we work with you so that you can go and apply for lots of grants for us? If you can take me on to the next slide, please. So we were approached in 2017, and in front of you is a picture of the Community Land Trust with a bit of snow on the ground, but just at the place that we were building the energy centre. And what these pictures depict is quite a different scene to the ones that you've just gone through, both in Edmonton and was it Notting Vale? This is a rural village. It's a mixture and combination of historic buildings, so a high street of medieval times, and then a whole range of homes from manor houses down to very small social housing. So it covers everything. It's also on a slope, and the local people have large amounts of social capital. They've done a lot of things in their village and they've achieved a lot. They've brought social housing into the village to be able to support families to stay in the village because house prices are so high. But the very positive thing about that is when they coalesce around an issue, then they want to drive that very hard. Obviously, on the other side of it, it also means that when they're unhappy about something, they can also coalesce and challenge very hard as well. So I'm just going to take you to the next slide. So we had roughly 300 homes, 2 churches, school, pub in the village, and Cambridgeshire County Council has a large rural estate, and our rural estate had land just on the edge of the village. And what the local people had identified was that there was a barn on the village edge, which if there was a community energy scheme that could be brought forward, that we could use our land and use our barn. So on the basis that we had just brought out a policy, which was to say that we would use our land and our assets to support community energy and renewable energy projects, this was the first community, literally the ink was drying on that policy, and they'd approached us and said, right, we want to use that land and we'd like you to help us and support us in this community energy scheme. Now, the demographics in the village are really important. So what you can see is there's quite a high number of people over 55. There's not that many young people left in the village, but what they're very conscious of is that they don't want their village to die, and they want to keep the school, and they want to ensure that there is that it's a village that keeps attracting young people to move into. And so the issue and challenge of an oil-based community is that younger people are more concerned around what they're going to be buying. And so in general, there was a sense, and some of the guidance and thoughts that they'd had in the village was that it would be more attractive to families to come to this village if we were changing their heating system. The right-hand side just shows the demographics of the housing, and that's really important. When you've got such a mix of housing archetypes in a village, plus the fact that there's a lot of conservation and listed buildings, you really need to think about what is the solution that you can provide to decarbonise a village. And one of the really difficult parts here, and it's the tension between fuel poverty and decarbonisation, is that we have looked to find a solution to decarbonise their heating. Separately, we've worked with them to see what and how they can undertake in terms of energy efficiency measures for their homes. But what we couldn't do was do it all in one. And that was partly because of the business cases that you're trying to build. So this one has been just managing the decarbonisation side. It's been a partnership. So without any one of these organisations in these big round blobs, we wouldn't have got there. So we had the Swaffham Pride Community Land Trust, who had experienced, highly motivated residents driving that community land trust, who have stood all the way through the project. Ultimately, we would have all liked this to have been a community energy project. What it's ended up being is a municipal energy project. And the key reason is you get to a certain type, scale of project and cost, and then it's very difficult for the risk to be sitting into something like a community land trust, because the risk is too high for them to take. And so the collaboration of having a local authority with a community group and using the benefits from both parties was probably what saw this project through to its conclusion, actually. But we did have a lot of support from HNDU. At the time it was BEIS, now it's DESNES, and they attended nearly all of our community meetings, all of our steering group meetings, and when we were looking for support on a whole bunch of issues, they would try and scout out and find out whether anybody else had experienced the same problem and would share that with us. So Bouygues are our technical partner, and now called Equans, and they were the ones who basically did the sort of techno-economic modelling, running through the options and the designs, and then have gone into a design and build framework. And we have also got them on an operations and maintenance contract, so that we have continuity between who built it and who's managing it and running it, so that if there are any challenges, which a retrofit of a district heat network at this scale is not commonplace, and so there was this sense that there was a risk of how was this going to work. And so Equans are effectively a solution through from design, build and operations and maintenance. It's always a journey. I think the other two speakers have identified that you go through a long journey in terms of development, and that's right, because you do need to get the buy-in. You do need to really have what you're doing scrutinised and tested by others, because it would be very easy to get this wrong. Most of the heat networks that are coming forward are sort of the front line that are coming through with this next generation of heat networks. And for many of us, delivering a heat network, and especially something which is a retrofit heat network, where you don't have the luxury of not having any infrastructure or obstacles in your way, you've got to work with all of that furniture, sort of the street furniture, the high streets, the housing, the lampposts, whatever's in your way, to be able to get your infrastructure retrofitted. But also, you don't have a captive audience. We can't compel any of the villagers to connect. It's up to them. They have to want to. Now, that might change as we move forward with some of the new heat zoning policy, but to date, this has all been around persuasion and sharing evidence, ensuring strong participation in the process and opportunities to challenge what we've been doing. So we had to have sessions where retired engineers in our village kicked the tires out of everything we were doing and were sort of, not holding back on their criticism of some of the stuff we were doing. But I think if we hadn't have had some of that, we probably wouldn't be in the position that we've got something constructed and operating, and has been operating for the last year. Just on this slide, you can see that you've got to go through a lot of phases of getting your investment and your development monies together. So we started off with Rural Community Energy Fund. We then had HNDU, Techno-Economic Modelling work. We then went back to HNDU for some work on risk management, which was right. We were disappointed at the time, but it was absolutely right that we had to drill a borehole into a field to see just what the quality of the heat was. And we needed to secure that there was some form of significant commitment by the village to sign up. So we went to the HNDU 3 times, and the only challenge with that is it is sequential. And so you can't speed things up that easily. You have to really think about how those things work together. Once we'd gone through HNDU support, we were guided to HNIP, and from HNIP we had commercialisation funding and then capital grant. And so as you can see, it is a 4 or 5 year timeline. So this is what we were building. So we have the barn, which is now converted into an energy centre, which has got some big thermal stores, those big round cylinders, which are red in this diagram, but silver in reality, are our heat stores. And then we've got the fan beds that sit outside. And then inside, there is a very complex mix of pipes and electronics, which I'll hopefully show you in a minute. What you'll see on the right hand side of this slide is that there's 7 kilometres of pipe work. I thought it was quite helpful to hear from the previous speaker, Sasha, that they'd done 6 kilometres. Because we're a village, obviously we have quite a long pipe work that we've got to install, and many less people are connected onto that pipe work, but that's a big cost for us. And it was the pipe work which HNIP help support. And their reason for supporting that was because the village doesn't have any gas, there isn't any facilitated infrastructure. And so this was the element that seemed discrete, which had longevity and a long timeline to be able to invest in. So this was the proposal as an infographic. So we had a ground source heat pump and air source heat pump. And one of the reasons for changing initially from just a ground source heat pump scheme to one with high temperature air source heat pump was 2 reasons. One, not to freeze the ground, because we were drilling 130 boreholes into the ground, but also to take the benefit of the shoulder periods where actually air source and the summer where air source heat pumps would be actually more beneficial and more efficient. So we've got air source and ground source, electrode boilers, we've got an energy centre feeding into an energy centre, feeding into a heat network, supplying customer homes. But also what we have is that we have a solar farm that we were building at the same time. And so we're just constructing and work started to get a private wire from our solar farm directly into the energy centre so we can fully decarbonise that system. So this was just another few images of the energy centre. The one on the left is showing the volume of pipework and complexity that sits within that green barn. So it's absolutely rammed, and so it's a complex system. And we have to realise just the complexity of some of these energy centres that we're bringing forward and the specialisms that are required to support that and the specialist skills. We probably have had more than 50 consultancies and companies working with Bouygues on the delivery of this project, some of them local, some of them further afield, who have the specialism. one of the big challenges we faced was, and it wouldn't be now, was that as quite a small project, just about £8 million, we couldn't compete in the market for getting good prices for borehole rigs and drilling. So lots of the borehole drillers were working on HS2 and other big projects. And so we had to negotiate any time that they were not needed. So, in between roles, in between jobs. And this added cost to us that was cost that we hadn't foreseen at that time. So this just gives you a sense of the borehole field. There's 130 boreholes drilled down to 180 metres. We did have a problem in the field in the fact that somehow there was a random piece of granite-like material at about 50 metres down, somewhere in the centre of the field, which meant we ended up breaking about 2 diamond drills trying to, well, first of all, discovering it and then trying to work out if we could drill through it. So we had to change our plans slightly. And so that's one of the things that you can do lots of studies which show you what's below ground, and you could do a borehole test, but still sometimes you have these unexpected problems pop up, which you have to deal with. These 130 boreholes are connected with gantries and connected, and the slide on the picture on the right gives you the sense of how those connections work in that field. Now all you'll see is a green field. So we've got the energy centre you saw, so that's up and running. We've got the boreholes, those are working, and we've got the heat network through the village. Those were all in a design and build contract. What we hadn't done, and in retrospect, this is something we would do quite differently, is we then had a separate contract for doing the home connections. And the reason we had that separate home connections contract was because when you go into a retrofit scenario, you can't get every householder to sign up ahead of something being constructed. They want to see that it works first. So we had no certainty around every single home connecting or wanting to connect quickly. So we had to start the design and build and then say we will connect homes at the end of the process. Now, inflation and all those horrible things that Sasha mentioned earlier then hit us. And the costs of the connections in terms of digging between our primary heat main, which is the thing you see on the left, and then going down into driveways and into homes. And let's not forget, in villages, you tend to have quite reasonable sized driveways. Those costs have been much more significant than we had planned for. But we've now got 63 homes connected. We've got another batch of homes coming forward, which we've had to package together and procure slightly differently, so that we can manage the costs better. And we've got that next batch coming forward for May, June, which will take us up to about 130 homes, and then we'll batch up again. These slides here just show you on the right hand side the heat interface unit. Thank you. Next slide. This is just some more slides showing you homes that have had the connections put into them. So where are we in terms of overall project? So we're cutting carbon. We've decarbonised heating and hot water. When we've got further connections, the ambition is 1,100 tonnes saved annually. We're not at that yet. And obviously, we've also reduced a lot of oil deliveries and taken out oil tanks so that people can't then even go back to oil. The cost we're currently charging, if people are interested, our charge on heat is 9.22 pence a kilowatt hour at the moment, plus VAT, and we peg it to DESNE's indices on, I think it's solid fuels, and we change that charge annually. So it will go up and down, and we aim to be able to secure a 5% below the oil price for the first 5 years, and then moving to being pegged to the electricity price by year 10 of the project. The big thing that we wanted to do and what our members were wanting to do is that upfront cost was not a barrier to joining. So all residents could join without any upfront cost. And then the cost would be paid back over time on a long business case. And the idea of this was to prevent the able to pay to decarbonise, and those not able to pay to continue with that cycle of higher costs on oil bills. I think that's it. There's one more slide, I think. There's been a lot of local communities that have come and visited and hopefully have been inspired by this. And then, okay, so the only thing I wanted to really highlight here was, you know, we have 19 years of income stream from the renewable heat incentive. We've got heat customers paying bills. We're looking and exploring flexibility services because there has been inflation costs onto the home connections and the challenge of the electricity bills while we've been waiting for the private wire connection. So there's lots of lessons to learn about working with communities, but I think the most important is if you have got a strong community that are wanting to drive this, they will drive it hard. And so we need to find those communities to help us deliver the whole heat network agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheryl. Fantastic. Do we have any questions? Anyone want to raise their hand and ask any questions to any of our speakers? Or I've got one to kick us off. Any immediate burning questions? Nope. So my first one, and I'd like each of you to take it in turn to answer if you could. Obviously the focus and sort of, I guess, the key reason for undertaking a heat network project initially is reduced energy costs and carbon savings. But what other sort of wider benefits have you realised in the local area? Any sort of key sort of social value learnings or benefits that people could take forward? I don't know whether Sheryl, you want to go first, or
happy to go first if you want me to. So obviously we were moving off of oil, and so there's been local air quality benefits that people have noticed. We've taken out their tanks in their gardens, they've got more space. So that's just on a very simple level. I think on a wider level, we're connecting homes which have been electrically heated, and this is costing them less. And so there's that benefit. So during this affordability crisis, they might be warmer than they would have been otherwise. And that has the obviously knock-on benefits to health.
Great, thank you.
I'll echo
Yeah.
I'll echo Sheryl in that you know, air quality improvements. There's eventually there'll be no more need for the gas boilers that are being installed at the moment. So where we would have, you know, we got 1,000 customers, there would have potentially been a significant number of either communal energy centres with boilers or individual gas boilers. Obviously they aren't needed. The other one, I think, which I didn't mention in the project, but we do some small retrofit pilots at the moment, retrofitting off ours, which again, similar to Sheryl, you know, savings for customers, and they're kind of benchmark to gas. So, but we save the council in that regard from having to do gas safety checks, and customers generally, I'm hoping, are able to stay warmer because they're not having to choose quite as much on whether to heat or eat, which is a bit of a buzzword, I guess, over the last couple of years, but it's very pertinent. I think that's probably it for me at the moment. Thank you.
Yes, similar on Lang West, we've got a bit of a campaign around goodbye gas, so removing gas from homes that we're internally refurbishing as part of the kind of heat network program as well. So similar kind of benefits that have already been described, and knock-on carbon emissions reductions as well.
Right, thank you.
I
sorry.
I was just going to say, I think there was a question for me about how we've engaged
Yes,
people
yeah.
on, which I'm sure you were going to ask me
Yeah.
at some point. So the question was about how we've engaged residents and stakeholders, given there's been controversy around the ERF, the energy recovery facility, the waste to energy plant, basically. It's an ever-present and ongoing discussion and discourse that we're having with people. We're kind of in a bit of a challenging position, as you know, we're not in control nor controlled by the waste authority, but obviously we're intrinsically linked by taking that waste heat. So we have to be factual and present our position and kind of let people make their own minds up. But our general kind of position is that, look, the existing facility is very old. It's 45 years plus. It's not the nicest, I think it's fair to say, facility. It's reaching the end of its life, but the new one should be a hell of a lot better. I mean, you look at Copenhagen, there's climbing walls and bars and ski slopes on their waste to energy plants, which maybe there's a missed trick there, but we basically said, look, we're making use of a waste resource which is going to be emitted to like lost to the atmosphere otherwise, and we're not primarily wedded to waste heat, and that's kind of something that we put a little bit of distance between ourselves. We kind of focus on the fact that we're building enabling infrastructure, which is one of our NED's terms. It doesn't matter what the heat source is, but we've always got this balance of cost effectiveness versus carbon, which, waste heat is significantly cheaper than heat pumps. It will last significantly longer, and the carbon is better. So, our response has always been, well, we could switch to air source, but that heat will still be being lost to the atmosphere, whether we take it or not. We could use various things that are around us. There's a big sewage treatment works. There's big reservoirs which we're looking at as part of the zoning pilot that I'm involved in. But we're looking at, I'm sure Sheryl's got some facts and figures, but you're looking at kind of £25 million plus to provide the heat pumps that we would need. And where's that recovered? It's not currently built into our business plan, and the Challenger, thanks David, technology agnostic. Yeah, exactly. The heat pump solution is a good one, and don't get me wrong, but you still have to produce power to put into it, and it will last maybe 20-25 years, whereas the waste supply, who knows. They would have to, the argument around whether we proliferate more waste being burnt is one that we can easily head off. There's a nice line on a graph that I've got which essentially shows that North London would have to reduce its 600,000 tonnes of waste input each year to about 60,000 tonnes, so 90% reduction before it affected the amount of heat that was provided to us. So we kind of have to lay the facts bare, and people will choose whether or not they accept it. But we do engage with various forums, climate action forums, and various people, and have to set our stall out accordingly. So that's pretty much it, I think. Hopefully that's gives it. Yeah, it's a difficult one.
Yeah. Sorry, I just saw Cheryl's message come through.
I can tell you what that's about, if you like, in the fact
Yeah.
that, I mentioned about the costs of the connections to homes, and you're obviously going into homes which are have got their own home decorations. They possibly just had their carpet laid, and so there's quite a lot of expectation when you go into these homes. But in Cambridgeshire, we have enough development work going on that there isn't an incentive for people to say, I'm just going to go and do my ordinary job of plumbing or gas engineer or oil engineer, or whatever else it is, to incentivize them to change. So there's high risk premiums being plugged into the pricing. And because there isn't significant competition, it's difficult to get those premiums down to a level that's really acceptable. So there has to be an incentive to move suppliers from fossil fuel industries into clean, and that needs to come quite quickly.
I'd echo that as well, that in order to, build on what Sheryl's talking about retrofitting, a lot of the issues that we faced in the small pilots that we did, not issues, but the costs and the delays come from the making good again.
Yes.
And the only way that we can kind of think of improving that situation is by getting big chunks of the plasterers or the plumbers or the decorators or whoever it is that need to come in afterwards, if you can give them like a big set rather than, oh, well, we've got this one here and then maybe we've got that one over there. So, you know, you kind of need that engagement en masse thing,
Yes.
which I think you probably experienced similar as well, because there's not that much cost saving that we can do otherwise. But in terms of, you know, that competition generating, we tried, and I think that's probably why were successful in our second HNIP bid to help generate some of that competition by carving up those lots into smaller packages, and then having those packages broken into A and B phases, so that there was kind of a carrot and a stick in terms of, you know, the promise of further work for good performance, and obviously loss of future work should you not perform so well. So that did quite well. I think we got 7 tenderers, and as you say, like risk pricing on civil engineering when they don't know what's coming and it's a nightmare is always factored in. And there was probably only 1 or 2 shows in town that could have bid for such a large project as ours. By breaking it up, we've brought a couple of new entrants to market, a couple of which have been really quite good. Yeah, but it's tiny. It's a small. There's not many in the marketplace.
No, increasingly seeing it growing though, which is really positive. Sheryl, something that you put in the chat around having a visible asset that people can come and see and learn from being a real benefit. I was really and I'm always a bit intrigued by the designs that we're seeing across different energy centres and energy assets. Shaun, the images that you showed with sort of the cooling towers and thermal storage, have you sort of found that developing a visually appealing building has sort of improved consumer engagement and sort of resident engagement activities?
Yeah, that was a design that's come from residents themselves. So we did a lot of engagement with residents, and a process that we went through to kind of understand what their ideas might be about what they wanted the energy sort of centre and the energy trees is being termed to look like or to feel like, basically. So engage some architects to run that alongside our own kind of engagement specialist, and yeah, just understanding what residents wanted their kind of estate to look like, and the visible nature of the kind of improvements that we're looking to make on the estate. Yeah, really engaging process, really kind of like, yeah, and that's one of the key benefits of the estate, is that bringing people in through the process to understand what physically it's going to look like enables them to then understand what the actual network is going to do to their lives, basically. It's been an interesting process of engagement, because, you know, what the residents want and what the wider community might want is not necessarily what maybe the members might want as well. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Can I add something onto that? Because it was my immediate thing when I saw the urban district heat networks, at how more beautiful they are possibly than our shed. But one of the things we had was in one of the COP meetings, we had a Japanese film crew come over, and we just had all of the pipe work done and covered over. And so there wasn't anything visible in a rural village which was priding itself on its historic beauty. And they said, what's really great about this scheme is you can't see anything, because when we went to the field, you couldn't see anything, again, because it was all covered over by mud at that stage. So the only visible thing is on the edge of the village in a barn. And we hadn't really understood the value of that at the time.
Just shows that you need different approaches for different situations.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't. If you'd have picked up one of those energy centres and put it in your rural location, it would have looked utterly ridiculous.
Oh no, it still looked lovely, but it's on the edge of a village. It's not a feature, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We had to tie in with the with the design of the new ERF that was behind it, and we would have happily and probably saved well, quite a lot of money. If we'd have been able to have a shed at the back of it, we actually did ask originally for a shed at the back of the site, which is massive, but we got one right at the front on the North Circular, so it had to be something that kind of reflected. Now it's got lights on the thermal stores and all that. So, but again, what Shaun said, like we had aspirations for green wall. Well, things came forward from councillors through the process of green walls and all kinds of different things, etc. But we were somewhat constrained by, again, budget and what was acceptable to the Waste Authority itself. Because we're right on the front, we look like we're part of their building, so it's a bit challenging. Sorry, Shaun.
I think our team's a bit individual in that respect, in the sense of, because we're here just to really fulfil residents' need for a particular situation, which is obviously emerged. That co-design aspect and really listen to them and finding out what residents want is driven to that kind of that aspect, I think. Whereas normally the examples that you guys have provided, you wouldn't necessarily want to be doing that. Well, you might do, might not do, but I think it's scheme specific, isn't it? Depending on where you are and what you want to do, what your budget is.
Yeah, definitely. Very different question from Sam in the chat. So he said it's clear that you've set up a transparent and collaborative partnership program with your local authority involving HNIP and local businesses, supply chain. How did you engage with the various internal local authority teams to get everybody on board?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one first if you like.
Sure.
So I'll give credit the now retired past chief executive and the current chief executive of Enfield Council. It was kind of their brainchild. So we had the early, very senior level buy-in at the beginning, and actually we had a two-tier, which is not on that on the slide, but a two-tier management structure which had senior members on board from the local authorities. So I say it in various presentations, but that senior level buy-in, the guys that make the decisions and hold the keys, is crucial for actually getting things going forward. Things tend to trickle down from there. So I think very early engagement from very senior politicians and officers to be brought on board from the beginning was the crucial for us, and that's gone forward from there. I think that's the summary.
I'd agree. So for us, it was definitely having strong political support for the project, and that was helped by the fact that residents were pushing this. It wasn't our initial design and project idea, so that gave strength to the project because of the variety of community that were involved, and I think probably we did get some pushback internally of your rural estate, your financing people, your planning people, your highways people. You still had to coordinate and work well, and rightly so. They challenged us because there were times we could have gone very wrong if they hadn't challenged us, to be honest.
From our slightly different context where we are, I think we worked collaboratively and pragmatically with other teams in the council. We've had buy-in from our lead member, who's no longer our lead member, who really championed the estate and the project that we're trying to do for internally. And we've kind of we've got our own kind of team on the estate, almost a bit of a kind of recovery team. So it's like a self-contained kind of like neighbour team, which delivers kind of most of the services on the estate. So we're able to do a lot of the kind of stuff ourselves, but yeah, pragmatic and kind of collaborative working where need be with other teams in the council, but having a lead member that was kind of championing that as well.
Right. I think we're probably at the end of our questions. Unless Andrew, you had anything that you wanted to ask our speakers?
I think we're more or less there. I think we've had a good discussion.
Perfect. Well, it's just for me to say thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Massive thank you to all of our speakers. If you aren't signed up to our mailing list yet, then please do so. There's a contact form on our website, and you can also email us with any questions that you have either about these projects, about HNIP, about GHNF or Beehive, or any of the resources that have been shared today. And please do follow us on social media. Once again, thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.